Jazakallah khair, Brother Imam Siraj Wahaj. It's always amazing hearing him speak and present out. So next, inshallah, I'd like to introduce Brother Ahmed Rehab, who is the Executive Director of CARE Chicago. Rehab is a regular contributor to the Chicago Tribune and Chicago Public Radio. He's been interviewed hundreds of times by newspapers, radio, TV, both national and international. Rehab lectures at various university campuses in Chicago and around the nation. He's the founder of Minhaj Inc., a global PR and outreach campaign that seeks to take back Islam from Muslims and anti-Muslim extremists alike. He's also the founder of ChicagoMonitor.com, the Muslim Youth Leadership Symposium, and the co-founder of the Bridge Initiative at Georgetown University. Prior to joining CARE in August of 2004, Rehab was a freelance speaker, writer, and activist in the fields of interfaith collaboration, education, and community outreach. Rehab serves as a board member of the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights. He also served on the Illinois Governor Pat Quinn's Muslim Advisory Council and as a vice chairman of Ragugi One, Illinois Premier's Refugee Resettlement Organization. He's a board member and secretary of the Egyptian American Society, a member of the Chicago Council of Global Affairs, Muslim Task Force, an Eisenhower Fellow of the American Assembly, and alumnus of the FBI Citizens Academy, and a senior consultant for the Syrian Forum based in Istanbul, Turkey. So without further ado, please welcome Brother Ahmed Rehab.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon you all. I understand it's 9:30 and we have 45 minutes left in the program. I'll try to not take the full time as people are probably getting tired, but it is a pleasure and an honor to be with you tonight to speak to one of the most organized and professional Muslim communities that I've come across anywhere in the nation. I believe it is because of the vision of the founders of this community, specifically the center, the imams that are involved in the spiritual guidance of the community, and the members of the community who are highly educated, hard-working, family-oriented people who have come together to build an organized community to serve themselves, serve their families, serve their larger community, society, and inshallah the world. My only regret about tonight is following immediately after Imam Siraj Wahaj. Because regardless of how good a speaker you are, you're always going to sound terrible coming after this very I'm glad he left the room. I waited for him to leave before I say this stuff. But mashallah, he is honestly, in his absence, I can say, one of the most passionate, sincere, hard-working, real leaders of the Muslim community. When I say real leaders, he's not the kind of man who pops up on stages or on YouTube or on television just to give the speech and run away. He's involved, immersed in his community. He has a community in New York. He's on the ground building this community up. He travels around, and everywhere he goes, he gets involved deeply in these communities. He's a humble man, he's connected. Now I say this not just to praise him, but because it will lead into what I have to say about how we need to move forward and evolve as activists, as mu'mineen, as believers, because we have role models amongst us, right? Now, Sheikh Jamal mentioned that Islam is succeeding not because of us, but despite us. And Imam Siraj Wahaj also said that oftentimes you have a very good product, but a bad salesman. And in this case, you have a bad deal. The product doesn't go far. In both instances, there's a clear implication that we're doing something wrong, right? And that's the obvious conclusion here. As an ummah, as a community, as Muslims, something's wrong. And it's not just Sheikh Jamal and Imam Siraj Wahaj who make this observation, but many of us have this conversation amongst ourselves. When we talk about where Muslims are, where Muslims used to be, where Muslims need to be, we don't seem to be very content or satisfied with where we are right now. So I want to drill a little deeper and address the question, are we in a good place? And if not, which seems to be the assessment, why more specifically? Now, when you get to the specifics, it becomes a more difficult conversation. It becomes a little bit more controversial, but we cannot afford to skip the conversation. We cannot afford to sweep it under the carpet. We cannot afford to give the good sound bites at the beginning of the conversation and at the end and skip the middle, because that's where the work is. If we're serious about change, if we're serious about getting what is right, getting what is wrong right, righting what is wrong, we need to start talking openly and obviously. If you're in a company, we have here many brothers at Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and other technology companies. And if you find that you have a situation where a process or a product isn't doing well, you're not going to sit there politely hinting at possible reasons. You're going to get a whiteboard and you're going to get very specific and walk through all the steps and find out where you went wrong, right? You're going to do analysis and deconstruction. If Facebook, Amazon, and other companies, Microsoft, are worth that kind of effort, is this deen not worth the same? But before I get to answering this question with some potential answers, I want to zoom out for a second and ask some very basic questions that will define the conversation. The first, rather general, large question is, what is Islam? Now, you can answer this question in a million different ways and be correct. But if we wanted to essentialize Islam, and by the way, I asked that question because I get asked that question many times on national television. Part of my job is media, talking to the larger mainstream American community, whether it's at the churches, at the synagogues, at the universities, or in the media. And that question is asked, as simple and as complex as it is in one go, it's asked. So if you were asked this question and you wanted to give the answer in a soundbite that would make sense to the audience that you know don't know much about Islam and its history, but is also true, because we're not in the business of just PR, where we just say things that need to be heard, right? You have to be true. You have to be authentic, first and foremost. What would you answer? What would you say? Well, after much thought, for me, essentializing Islam would mean a three-way relationship of peace, a tertiary peace process that involves peace between oneself and one's Lord, one's Maker, oneself between me and myself, and between me and the other. So it's peace between me, there's a peace between me and my Maker, me and myself, me and the other. And if you look at everything within the ocean of Islam, you will find that it deals with one of the three. Now, if that is the direction we're going to take in explaining it, first we have to be clear. What do we mean by peace? Because a lot of people have simply answered Islam as peace. And there's been a lot of criticism of this statement. On the Islamophobe side, they say, oh yeah, Islam is a religion of peace. Have you seen the most recent terrorist bombings in Africa, in Europe, in America, in Asia? Oh yeah, it's a religion of peace, all right. But also on the Muslim side, you have a lot of people who say, look, stop sucking up to Christians, or to white people, or to Americans, and telling them Islam is a religion of peace. It's much more than this. You're watering it down, you're diluting it, you're whitewashing it. And so it's criticized from both ends. But let's be clear, we're not saying a religion of pacifism. We're saying a religion of peace. And then we're going to define what this peace means. I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean a truce. What's a truce? A truce simply means, if I have a truce with you, right? We're in a truce. What does it mean? That we avoid each other. That we avoid war with each other. If we can avoid war with each other, two entities have a truce between them, means the two entities avoid war with one another. That's not the peace we're talking about. Peace is a positive word. It's not just the negation of something negative or something evil, but it's the presence of something positive and great. it's fulfillment between the two entities. They fulfill one another. There's contentment and there's fulfillment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not shy away from explaining the ultimate salvation for a human being as that of Allah being pleased with us and that we're pleased with Him. رَضَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضِيُوا عَنْهُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with us and we're pleased with Him. In that relationship of peace, there's fulfillment. Allah is pleased with us and we are fulfilled by Allah. When we talk about peace with oneself, oftentimes as a Muslim community we talk about justice, do we not? A lot of times, justice, justice, justice. You know, we talk about injustice all the time. Have you heard what happened in Egypt? Have you heard what happened in Palestine? Have you heard what happened in Libya? Have you heard what happened in Syria, in Bosnia, in Chechnya? And a lot of our conversation, a lot of our public activism is about somebody befalling us with a certain injustice that we need to raise money for and awareness about, and it goes on in cycles, one generation after another, and that's a big, big part of our social and religious existence. But do we realize that the greatest injustice anybody has ever committed against anybody else is the soul against itself? You're more likely to have been unjust to yourself than to anyone else. ظلم النفس. And we don't really think about it this way. We don't think about how I have hurt myself with my own hand. When we talk about peace with oneself, we're talking about a sense of awareness and self-perception that avoids this. And we'll get into this a little deeper. And then when we're talking about relations between one and the other, the world is rife with conflict. And the absence of peace means that we don't understand one another, we hate one another, we kill one another, and so on and so forth. Now mind you, when we say Islam is a three-way relationship of peace, peace with oneself, peace with Allah, and peace with the other, we have to be sequential about it. In order for me to have truly inner peace, that is peace with myself, inner peace, I have to have peace with Allah first. And before anyone can be at peace with their neighbor or their friend or another country or another entity in the world, they have to have inner peace first. So that's the sequence. You will never find someone truly at peace with the world when they don't have inner peace, when they have inner anger and bitterness and a sense of self-victimhood and a sense of loss and an inner storm, you know, and they're depressed internally and they have all these issues. It's going to be very difficult for that person to have the patience and the open-mindedness and the calmness of mind and heart to extend a hand out and try to heal the world when they're not healed internally. So it starts internal. We fix ourselves. But you're never going to find someone who truly arrives at inner peace without first making peace with their Creator. That is the sequence. That is the sequence. Now, in the Seerah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the very end of his prophethood, he delivered a sermon. In it, he stated that he completed his mission. Each one of us has a mission in life. We get to choose this mission. First of all, will we have the honor of choosing the same mission as the Prophet Muhammad? And second of all, when we are on our deathbed or approaching our demise, our end, will we be able to tell ourselves or tell others that I have achieved my mission? Or even, because maybe we're not in a position to say that we've achieved it, have I worked hand and foot and tooth and nail for this mission? Have I given all for this mission? What was Prophet Muhammad's mission? And what was unique about it? It was conveying Islam to the world, conveying this three-way relationship of peace to the world. And the unique thing about it is that it was to the world. Let us remember something very important, and our young children, our young brothers and sisters, please listen up. Islam wasn't founded by the Prophet Muhammad. You'll see this in Encyclopedia Britannica. Maybe a teacher will say it. But let's be clear. Islam was not founded by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Islam was completed, was culminated, was sealed by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was the seal of the prophets. He was in a series of prophets, all of whom were prophets of Islam. The first prophet of Islam being Adam alayhi salam. In this series of prophets is Noah, Idris, Ibrahim, Jacob, Isaac, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of them shared the same basic message of this three-way relationship of peace, of healing, of overcoming suffering and pain. All of them had the same value system. It never changed at any point in time. The details that were required to govern this three-way peace, as the message expanded, became more complex, more sophisticated, and more detailed. But the basic truths never changed. It wasn't as if one prophet began by saying, Allah is three, and then later it was reformed to one. It wasn't as if in the olden days the prophet said, when you die you're done, and then a new prophet came with a novelty that, oh no, there's Jannah and there's Nar, there's Khulud, there's eternal life. The basic message was always one. One God, one Creator, one humanity, one day of judgment, the belief in the books, the belief in all of the prophets. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ sealed the deal. He culminated, he delivered, he did indeed achieve and complete his mission. And what was this mission? If nothing is new in terms of the basics, what was the greatest and most important novelty in the message of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? Well, it was that the Prophet Muhammad's message was to whom? To the world. In every instance before him, even though it was the same basic message, the same basic beliefs, the same basic truths, it was ordained by Allah, not by the prophets themselves, that the audience of that truth, of that message that never changed, would be a particular group of people. In most cases, their nations. Whether that be a family, a tribe, or a slightly larger nation. And it wasn't until the final prophet that Allah ordained that his audience be al-alameen, the world, the universes. Prophet Moses addressed the Hebrews. Prophet Jesus, Isa, alayhi salam, also addressed the house of Israel. Mind you, even in the Bible today, with all of the various changes over time that we believe occurred as Muslims, still the texts of the Bible are clear that Jesus himself, according to the Bible itself, never claimed to be addressing humanity, but rather the house of Israel, between quotes. But in the Quran, the claim is clear. In the Seerah, the claim is clear. In the historiosity, which is the writing of history, the claim is clear in the case of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he was ordained, he did claim, and it was claimed about him that he was addressing the universe, the alameen. When you realize that Islam now has taken a shape in the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was his mission, to grow and culminate into a system, into an order, into a process that can help the whole world achieve this three-way relationship of peace. And that we become the inheritors of this mission. He didn't finish it, he finished delivering it, he started its distribution to the world. And the rest rests on us. We are the inheritors of this great mission. And you also realize that when you understand that this religion is for the alameen, you zoom out a little bit more and you wonder, are we presenting it as a religion that is indeed digestible to the whole world? Or are we adding to it something else as we try to sell it to other people? Namely, our own comfort zones, which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ never did. He always gave it in its pure form. First of all, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not at any point give preference or favoritism to his own nation in the process of da'wah. In other words, the nation or the tribe of Quraysh did not receive any special status or favoritism from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He did not take this religion and say, I will use it to empower my tribe. I will use it to reform my tribe. I will use it as the identity of my tribe. And yet, we Muslims, the inheritors of this mission, whether we admit it or not, will use this religion as a form of national supremacy to make our tribe feel better, our nation feel better. We talk about Pakistan or Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Palestine as if it were inherently by Islam, for Islam, exclusively outside of the rest of the world. And then we talk about Norway and Sweden and America and everywhere else as if it's outside the rahmah of Allah. They're the other side. We've drawn new lines in the sand. We're the saved, we're the right ones. We are the inherent Muslims, as if we were, chosen by Allah to be that as opposed to anybody else. And everybody else, khalas, they're the other. They're the ones that we fight against. That is not in the tradition or the seerah or the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. At every point in time, everybody who lives with a mind that thinks and a heart that beats is a potential Muslim until proven otherwise, which is by death and death alone caused by Allah. Until the last breath in that body, they're a potential Muslim. They're nothing else, nothing less. And our job is to always give the opportunity, never to be a blockade, never to be the one who calls it done, never to be the one to condemn anybody, but rather to be the humble carpets that others can walk on to get to the right place if we can become that. Because in that is glory. This is not something that ridicules or humiliates. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ went through a lot. As we know, this is a man who was spared no human pain or suffering. And one can think, if this is a man chosen by Allah to be the greatest of all men, of all human beings, indeed of all creatures, then why didn't he get a free pass on some of the stuff that we all go through? As a matter of fact, he didn't. And as a matter of fact, he got it worse. What's some of the strongest human pains or emotions one can experience in this life we call, living as a human being? What is it? Losing a parent? Let's start from the beginning. Losing a parent? He lost both, not one but both. One before he was born, his father, and the other when he was 6 or 7 years old, at the time that he needed her most. Okay? Well, there are other relatives. Maybe his grandfather, great. And he was able to channel his loneliness and his hurt to this one man, and then he was taken as well. So he wasn't spared the father or the mother or the guardian that he learned to love as a result of the absence of the first two. And even then, when he found an uncle that can provide for that, also his uncle was taken away at a time in which he needed him the most. So he wasn't spared. He wasn't given any freebies. What other human suffering can one feel? Losing one's child? He didn't just lose 1 or 2 or 3. I think it was 4. He buried 4 of his children. How many human beings go through being orphans? And on top of it, both parents. And on top of it, losing a child. And on top of it, 4 of the children. Human physical pain. In battle, he was struck so hard that the inner molars, the inner back teeth of his jaw were thrown out. That's how hard he was struck in battle. You can imagine the blow, the strength of the blow. He wasn't spared that either. How many of us have been in such a position where we're struck so hard that the back teeth that are rooted inside of our own flesh are plucked out? And the suffering and the pain that goes with that. Psychological pain. Well, we all feel that we're something. We're in good positions, perhaps. We've achieved a level of social status in some way or another. I'm not saying that we're arrogant, but we feel content. We feel proud of where we are in society. We would be offended if we were humiliated in one way or another. And yet, we're not exactly leaders of nations or tribes, let alone the best of men, the best of creatures. And yet this man, knowing that he was created to be the prophet, knowing that this was his mission, knowing that he was Rahmatan lil Alamin, knowing that he had all of these reasons to expect better, was not spared psychological torture and suffering and humiliation. When he was chased up and down hills by children throwing rotten tomatoes and rocks. Just think of yourself in that position. Think that you are asked to do whatever mission, let's say passing out flyers for the sake of Allah. To what end would you continue to do that simple mission or difficult mission? Even after you're chased down alleys and thrown with stones and you start bleeding and you're thrown rotten tomatoes and people are laughing at you. And you know, well, we don't, but the Prophet ﷺ knew who he was. But still, his kibriya, his pride did not come in the way because he had a mission that he needed at the end of his life, at the last day, when he gave that speech, he needed to be able to say, today I have delivered your religion to you. I have delivered my mission. He spared no effort, put no pride above the mission itself. Why? Because it was for the alameen. It was for the universes. It was always focused on helping the world know and learn about this three-way relationship of peace that is about healing mankind from suffering. Not just in this world, but in the next. In a nutshell. In a nutshell. And when you talk about all the other details, all the other abwab or chapters or episodes of our religion, it is the details of that general headline. The headline that is Islam as a way of life that helps us overcome suffering in this world and the next through a three-way relationship of peace. Then we get into prayer. How prayer achieves that? Well, it gets you to acknowledge the oneness of Allah, the ibadah to Allah Almighty. How does that affect our soul, our spirit, our physical existence, our relationships? You get into all of these details with Sawm, fasting, with Hajj, and what it means socially, psychologically, spiritually. Every little detail, big and small, in this religion becomes a commentary on this very headline, surrounded and targeted around the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Tawheed. Now, we go back to the original question, where did we go wrong? If all of this is true, which it is, how come the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to our shuyukh, our ulama, our experts, isn't doing so well? That there's much to be desired, much left to be done. And when we say it's not doing too well, it's not just in the religious arena. But if you were to look at Muslims as a civilization, and you would look at the Muslim world, first of all, let me back up and say that's a misnomer. Because the Muslim world is anywhere a Muslim is. If you say the Muslim world as a geographic area, then you've just excluded many Muslims. If you mean by the Muslim world, Morocco to Indonesia, and down south to the tropicals of Africa, you've excluded, say, some of the names you mentioned earlier, Muhammad Ali, Siraj Wahaj, Malcolm X, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because they're from America. So they're not Muslim, they're not part of the Muslim world. The Muslim world celebrates them, but they're not part of the Muslim world? No. The Muslim world is anywhere where Muslims are. The whole world, as is the Christian world, right? But when we want to talk about a geographic location, let's be more specific and say Muslim majority world. Because then we can say, okay, we can look at these areas where Muslims are a majority in number. It's this country, it's this province, it's this city, it's this area. And that's an actual geographic area. That's more fair, that's more accurate. And when we talk about that, then we can say from Morocco to Indonesia and down south to the tropicals, That's the Muslim majority world. In it are Christian minorities and others, and outside of it are Muslims still. Now that we've gotten our lingo straight, you look at the Muslim majority world and any facet of a civilization, and you find that there's much lacking. When you look at birth rates, when you look at the rate of deaths of infants, when you look at health indicators, when you look at education systems, when you look at levels of corruption in governance, when you look at pollution, when you look at academic achievement, when you look at the Nobel Prize or any other prize you like in science or any indicator of science achievement, inventions, discoveries, medicines, etc. When you look at even athletics, the Olympics, and the number of gold medals or silver medals won by the Muslim majority world versus Cuba, which alone in one Olympics can win as much as half or more of the entire Muslim majority world. I won't even get so far as Russia or Germany or the United States. Cuba, the little island of Cuba. These are facts. Athens publishes more books than the entire Muslim world combined in a year. One city in Europe. Now, when you look at all these indicators, obviously there's a problem. And we've gone up and down, left and right, trying to figure out that problem. Many said it's a lack of Islam. And Islam is the solution. And Islam huwa al-hal. And so, but what does that mean? We already have Islam, obviously. If you go to Cairo, where I'm from, proudly, I love my home country, between every mosque and a mosque is a mosque. Between every adhan and adhan is an adhan, and between every ear and another is what we call a zabiba, the mark on the forehead, the sign of prayer and prostration, mashallah. And when you go to the mosque, the khatib is talking about cleanliness and orphans and the homeless. And on your way back from the mosque, and this is not just in Cairo, it's in many other Muslim cities or in the Muslim majority world, you come back hearing about this very earnest, very sincere khutbah from this very good man about orphans. You're passing orphans on the street. You're jumping over them. And you're seeing heaps of garbage behind the mosque, to its left or to its right. I'm sorry, these are facts. So it's going to be a hard conversation, okay? We have to go through the details and try to think a little more earnestly with each other. Now, the problem here is not in religion. They know what is right from what is wrong. We know what is right from what is wrong. Our religion is there. It never went away. It's ma'adhan are there. It's mu'adhaneen are there. It's salawat are there. It's all there. You can add more of it, but if you're doing more of the same, we're not getting very far. And I take some issue. I praise the Imam Siraj al-Hajj, but in all fairness, I take some issue with some of the message, although I don't think it was intended, but this notion of the rise of Islam being equivalent to the rise of the number of Muslims, I don't buy into. Because many of the Muslims that were mentioned in the statistics are nominal Muslims. They're Muslims by name or by identity. It's like being in a team, wearing a team jersey, the team colors. You root for it. You stand up for it. But Islam is more than that. We talked about belief. And Imam Siraj al-Hajj correctly stated it is more than just acknowledgement of the oneness of Allah or that He is the creator, but it's actually buying into and investing into a relationship with Allah that brings peace. The two-way relationship, the three-way relationship is peace. But that type of practice, that type of level, that type of consciousness is few and far between still. So in many ways, the 1.7 billion that's mentioned isn't really an accurate reflector of the type of Islam or the type of Muslims we really intend to be talking about when we say these numbers. Right there is an unfair, delusional reading of reality. He mentioned the numbers of Christians in France, which I'm very, very, very aware of. I do a lot of research on Islam in Europe. It is correct about all the numbers. But quite frankly, the same percent, the same low percent of Catholics in France who don't visit a church is the same low percentage in the Muslims of France who don't visit a mosque. And if we want to gloss over that little fact, As we beat our chests about Islam being on the rise just because the numbers are high, we're missing the picture, we're missing the story. So we go back to the idea of what is missing. It isn't Islam, Islam is there. Islam is the solution. Of course it is. As Professor Sharif Basuni once said to somebody who told him, wait, how come you don't agree with this? He said, no, I agree. Islam is the solution. And Muslims are the problem. It doesn't say much when you say Islam is the solution. Islam doesn't walk. Islam doesn't talk. Muslims do. Let's talk about us. Let's talk about the human beings. That is the first step towards a solution. When we acknowledge, when we sit back, take a step back, take a deep breath, and realize and acknowledge that religion doesn't run itself, that it is about the human experience. As much as we don't question the revelation, the perfection of He who revealed it, the full prophecy and the messengership of those who delivered it, when it comes to us, we need to sit back, be a little humble, and say it's about humans. Between revelation and practice, between revelation and implementation, is always a filter. Let's admit to this. A filter called interpretation. Revelation does not come into implementation as one full sweep, boom, full swoop. There's humans who will take the message, they will interpret it in one way or another, hopefully we interpret it correctly, and then we implement what we understand that was filtered through the human mind. So, where have we gone wrong, and where can we go right? In a nutshell, where we have gone wrong is not that we once had Islam and now we don't. Islam is there and will be there. It's not that we were once united and now we're disunited. I don't think really we were ever that united. After the Khulafa al-Rashidun, not too long thereafter, there were wars between Muslims, and they continued through the history of Islam, not because Muslims are particularly bad or particularly violent. To the contrary, there were less wars between Muslims than between Christians in Europe, but because that's the nature of mankind, and Muslims are of mankind. Muslims, surprise, are part of mankind. And what you're looking at when you look at this history is history. One of the biggest mistakes we make is looking at Muslim history as if it were part and parcel of revelation. Revelation ends with the Prophet. Put a big fat period at the end of that. Everybody thereafter, including the Sahaba, including the best of them, should be filed under history. And when we study them as historical figures. It doesn't mean that those great Sahaba, Mubashirun bil Jannah and others, are not wonderful human beings. To the contrary, it is because we acknowledge that they're just human beings who are not prophets, who are part of history and not revelation, that their achievements are so important that we ought to talk about them because they're closer to our fallible existence. So let's be clear about what we're saying and what we're not saying. I'm not saying focus on the Quran and the Sunnah and just forget about the Sahaba. No. I'm also not saying let's elevate parts of the Islamic historical experience to the level of revelation itself. That actually would be shirk, believe it or not. What I am saying is approach it as history with the critical mind that history requires, and then revelation is on a pedestal on its own. But we go back to the main point, and that is Islam was always there. When you look at our history, you realize we glorify and romanticize it beyond reality. It was better than many other nations, but it wasn't perfect. And there was disunity and war amongst Muslims, as I mentioned, from the very, very start after the Khulafa al-Rashidun. So that's not new. What is new? What happened when you look at the history of Muslims and you see golden age, boom, and then it goes worse. Where did the change occur? I would submit that the problem is at the human level. We've established that there is between revelation and implementation is interpretation. That is the first clue. It's the human being we ought to be talking about. Let's stop hanging our failures on Islam, this magic creature that walks and talks, supposedly. The second step is to drill a little deeper and realize that what we once had that was helpful And what we lost, and has been, I think, in my humble opinion and reading of history, and reading of the history of Islam, to have been the culprit, is foregoing, ignoring, allowing the slow death of the greatest gift Allah has ever given us. What is the greatest gift that Allah has ever given us? That's actually a question. What is the greatest gift that Allah has given you? I can't hear you. Okay, but what is the greatest gift He has given you in you? Your mind. Your mind. Yes. It is because He has given us a mind that we're able to discern right from wrong, truth from falsehood, light from darkness, and therefore become Muslims. Islam, which somebody mentioned is the greatest gift, I have no qualms with that. That's a wonderful answer. But I would submit that it's a consequence of another gift. What makes us different from other creatures, whether living or not living, is the mind. The ability to discern right from wrong, beauty from ugliness, etc. Through that gift, we are able to do ijtihad and reach even the conclusion of the existence of Allah. Then, inshaAllah, the belief in Allah. Then, inshaAllah, the wonderful relationship of peace, of rida, two-way rida with Allah. Now, if we begin to forego and ignore and allow this greatest gift, which was the reason for us being Muslims to begin with, to be at the very end of the line, to leave it at the door when you enter the masjid, to leave it at the door when you enter the Islamic school or the Islamic classroom, because it's haram to ask a question, it's haram to think critically, it's haram to debate or to engage in critical thought. Goodbye, good luck, and good night. It's done. Not just in the Muslim experience, but in the human historical experience. We have every right to demand critical thinking be a component of our ijtihad in this religion. By that, I don't mean that we allow our whims and desires to overtake true revelation, because that was the excuse used to close up human minds in medieval ages, therefore creating the turn from the golden age into the age of stagnation that still lingers to this day. And much as we talk about the problem, we never want to get to the root cause. This is the root cause. But what I'm saying is, by allowing ourselves to think within parameters that are set by great philosophers, by the prophets, by Allah, within those parameters, we as human beings have every right to engage our faith critically so we can be able to allow our interpretation to be meaningful to our lives, to our time, to deal with the problems that are new, challenges that are new, issues that are novel. Without being able to do that, we'll still be stuck in trying to extrapolate something that was done 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, straight into an environment that it does not belong in to the letter, having weird and mixed results. So I want to conclude because my time is up. Actually, I was told until 10:15, but I saw the sign. So I did promise I'd end early, so he has every right to raise the sign. But we need to engage in critical thinking when it comes to our religion. Again, we have the black and white. We have what is haram and halal. There's no discussion there. This is not about an existentialist, philosophical, debate from the very beginning to the very end. But within the gray areas that are very clearly undefined in many ways, we have every right to start to, and again, let the scholars lead the way, let the ones with the ilm and the knowledge lead the way. But we demand that we engage critically in thinking about our problems. When we do, we realize that our problems can be solved, that we created them, and we can solve them as human beings. Whether it's in education, whether it's our relationships with each other, whether it's in the tribalism or the racism or the sexism or the hate or the bigotry that plagues humanity. And in doing so, let's remember that we are part of this humanity. This is a human problem, and the solution is for all humans. Islam is for all humans. I want to conclude by reminding us that if there's a message in the Seerah, that this healing process, this invitation for humans to use their best gift, to work up the relationship through the knowledge of the texts and revelation, to build this relationship of peace with the Maker, therefore achieving inner peace, therefore being able to have peace with the world around them, from their parents to their neighbors to their teachers to their different nations between each other, etc., can only be achieved if we first start to think critically about why we're here and what we're doing. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.